Something unusual is happening inside global crypto regulation, and almost nobody is connecting the dots. While most digital asset firms are shrinking or retreating to friendlier jurisdictions, Ripple has spent the last few years doing the opposite. It has expanded its regulatory footprint one license at a time, not to survive in the industry, but to anchor itself directly inside the legal perimeter of global finance. And this creates a tension that sits at the center of this story. On the surface, it looks like compliance, but beneath it, you can see the early shape of a regulated settlement institution forming piece by piece. Everything here is for educational and entertainment purposes only, not financial advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions. If clear, no hype crypto education helps you make sense of all this. Hit like and subscribe. It tells YouTube this series is worth showing to other newcomers, and it helps me keep building it for you. You might hear licensing strategy and expect bureaucracy, but what Ripple is building is not just a map of permissions. It's an operating structure meant to carry real flows for banks, corporates, and global payment networks. The question is why all of this is happening now, and how these pieces fit together into something more ambitious than any single region's rules. To understand why Ripple built such a wide regulatory foundation, you have to go back almost a decade. In 2015, Ripple was fined by the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network for operating without proper controls. It was one of the first digital asset enforcement actions of its kind. For many companies, that kind of hit becomes a scar. For Ripple, it became a turning point. Instead of fighting the regulatory tide, the company leaned into it, adopting the same compliance posture that banks and custodians operate under. That moment shaped everything that followed. While other projects were optimizing for speed and speculation, Ripple was building what regulators call Bank Secrecy Act controls, the same financial crime and customer verification safeguards that banks are required to follow. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Ripple layered those rules into governance frameworks and cross-border compliance systems. The company didn't always call attention to these moves. It didn't need to. The long arc of the strategy was already set. If digital settlement was ever going to reach mainstream finance, someone had to build the plumbing regulators could actually trust. The United States forms the structural spine of Ripple's licensing web. The starting point is simple. Ripple and several of its entities operate as money services businesses under FinCEN, bringing them under federal anti-money laundering supervision. Layered onto that is a network of state-level obligations for money transmission and digital asset activity. But the real center of gravity is New York. Every major institutional player understands that New York's financial rules are among the strictest in the world. Passing through that filter signals something different to the market. That's why Ripple didn't start with a flashy announcement. It started with a foundation: money service registrations, state supervision, federal reporting, institutional custody through its acquisition of standard custody. The perimeter wasn't built all at once. It was assembled like a regulatory scaffold. New York's Department of Financial Services is known for one thing above all else. If you can get a product approved there, the world will probably accept it. That matters for RLUSD, Ripple's dollar-backed stablecoin. The agency reviewed its reserve model, its controls, its governance, and its risk mitigation before granting approval. This wasn't a formality. New York's stablecoin rules require full backing, audited reserves, strict redemption rights, and operational oversight. For Ripple, passing through this gate changes the character of RLUSD. It is no longer just a token issued by a private company. It is a supervised financial instrument operating under one of the toughest regulatory frameworks in the country. And when you pair that with Standard Custody's trust charter status, something interesting happens. Ripple controls both the issuance layer and the bank-style custody layer inside a single regulated environment. The licensing web turns into something more ambitious when you look at Ripple's national bank application. Seeking a charter from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, the federal agency that supervises national banks, is not something you do casually. These charters place institutions under federal banking law, require significant capital, and demand strong governance standards. But they also unlock something powerful: the ability to operate across all 50 states without needing separate approvals in every jurisdiction. For RLUSD, a charter like this would mean federal supervision layered on top of New York's regime. It would align the stablecoin with national banking standards, rather than leaving it in the patchwork of state rules. It also sets the stage for deeper institutional integrations. A bank-chartered Ripple can serve corporates, exchanges, and financial institutions with a kind of regulatory clarity that most crypto firms simply cannot replicate. If the national charter is the skeleton, the Federal Reserve Master Account application is the bloodstream. A master account is how institutions settle directly with the Fed. It is how money actually moves at the core of the system. Ripple has advocated for a limited or so-called skinny master account model that allows non-banks controlled access to settlement infrastructure. If granted, this would position Ripple not as an outsider connecting to banks, but as an institution capable of touching the settlement layer itself. The implications for RLUSD are subtle but significant. Reserve funds could be held in a safer way, redemption could be executed more cleanly, and large institutions could treat the stablecoin as a more direct bridge into traditional settlement flows. This is the kind of institutional comfort that only comes from regulation, not marketing. When you shift from the United States to Asia, the licensing pattern changes, but the intent stays the same. In Singapore, Ripple's regional entity holds a major payment institution license from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. That license is not easy to get. It requires capital, governance, safeguarding of customer funds, and a risk framework that mirrors a traditional financial institution. Singapore sits at the intersection of Asian banking, global remittances, and the rapidly expanding world of tokenized assets. Operating there under a major institution license signals something clear to banks in the region. It says that Ripple is not a speculative entrant, but a regulated counterparty, capable of handling cross-border financial flows in a compliant way. And because Singapore's rules for digital payment tokens have become some of the most respected in the world, that license acts as a stamp of institutional readiness. Dubai took a different approach to digital assets, building a dedicated framework through its financial free zones and virtual asset authorities. Ripple's approvals there are more than a regional foothold. They place the company inside a jurisdiction intentionally designed for global finance. Crucially, Dubai's regulators have permitted XRP as a virtual asset for supervised firms, which means the asset itself can be used in institutional settings without regulatory ambiguity. This matters because the Middle East is becoming a hub for multi-currency settlement, cross-border payments, and on-chain finance experiments. A regulated presence there gives Ripple something few companies have: access to banks and corporates that want to test digital settlement without leaving the regulatory perimeter. It also complements Singapore's role, creating a time zone bridge between Europe and Asia. Europe is rolling out the most comprehensive digital asset framework in the world through MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation. Ripple has positioned itself to operate directly inside that system. In Luxembourg, the company has established Ripple Payments Europe, which is pursuing licensing under Europe's electronic money rules. If approved, RLUSD would become an e-money token under MiCA, fully redeemable, fully backed, and passportable across the entire European Economic Area. This is more than regulatory housekeeping. Under MiCA, a single license in Luxembourg or Ireland can serve clients in 30 countries. For corporates, funds, and payment networks operating across borders, this kind of uniformity is invaluable. It means RLUSD could move through the European banking system in a way that aligns with local consumer protection rules, prudential standards, and financial crime obligations. Ireland plays a parallel role. Ripple Markets Ireland is registered as a virtual asset service provider, and is positioned to integrate with Europe's upcoming digital finance rules. Together, Luxembourg and Ireland form a dual gateway into MiCA's fully harmonized system. The result is a structure where RLUSD, custody, and payment flows can operate under a single continental framework rather than 27 separate ones. Outside the major hubs, Ripple relies on a combination of partnerships, joint ventures, and targeted acquisitions to extend its coverage. In Japan, the company's long-standing joint venture with SBI gives it a regulated presence inside one of the most conservative and highly supervised financial systems in the world. Japanese banks and remittance providers already use Ripple's technology for cross-border payments, and the regulatory foundation is what makes that possible. Canada is another example. Rather than building from scratch, Ripple is integrating its stablecoin and payment stack into Rail, a regulated money service business already supervised by FinTech. This gives RLUSD distribution capacity without requiring Ripple to form a standalone Canadian entity. It also mirrors a pattern seen across the entire licensing web. When the regulatory doors narrow, Ripple partners with or acquires someone already inside. Beyond these regions, Ripple's reach extends through regulated partners rather than direct licensing. In South America and Africa, companies like Tranglo, MFS Africa, and Travelex hold their own payment institution approvals, giving Ripple compliant corridors without requiring a local Ripple entity in each country. In parts of Asia, Singapore acts as Ripple's regulatory anchor, enabling lawful connectivity into markets such as China and Hong Kong, where foreign crypto licensing is tightly restricted. The result is broader functional coverage than the formal license list might suggest, built through partners operating inside their own regulatory perimeters. Taken together, these regional nodes form a global mesh. The deeper meaning of this licensing web becomes clear only when you zoom out. Ripple is not positioning itself as a crypto company that happens to offer institutional services. It is becoming a multi-jurisdictional financial institution built around digital settlement. The licenses are not the goal. They are the perimeter that allows payments, prime, treasury, custody, and RLUSD to operate as a unified system, rather than a collection of products. Banks and corporates do not adopt technology because it is clever or fast. They adopt it when they can trust the counterparty, trust the controls, and trust the legal environment in which assets move. Ripple's licensing strategy answers those needs directly. It creates an institutional comfort zone. It removes ambiguity around stablecoin issuance. It aligns custody with fiduciary standards. And it connects all of it to a settlement engine, the XRPL, that is designed for speed, finality, and deterministic execution. This is the part most people miss. The regulatory web is not a cost center. It is Ripple's moat. And as the world moves from tokenization pilots to production-grade settlement, that moat becomes a competitive advantage. The tension that opened this story, why a crypto-native company would build such an extensive regulatory perimeter, resolves when you see the strategy as a whole. Ripple is creating a structure that blends the reliability of traditional finance with the efficiency of on-ledger settlement. It is doing so across multiple jurisdictions, under multiple regulatory frameworks, with a stablecoin designed for institutional use at the core. And it is doing it quietly, knowing that when global finance shifts, the institutions with the strongest regulatory foundations are the ones that endure. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive. This channel is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and is not financial advice. Always do your own research and keep the discussion respectful. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, or sharing it with a friend.